My dad used to tell me this. I'm in Thailand visiting my father, so it's only right that I use his words. He used to say this all the time, and I never understood it until I got older. He said, "Money can't buy you happiness, but the lack of money will certainly make your life a lot difficult." And I never understood that, because there's this saying like everyone just says money can't buy you happiness, and then they forget the other dot dot dot, right? Like you kind of need the financial well-being. That's just the way the world works.
Tarun, welcome to Live Long and Prosper. It's so good to see you and to finally have you on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. I'm looking forward to this. Been obviously a proud former Arta member and a user, and been mindfully listening and watching a lot of these podcasts as you post them. So thank you for having me.
Oh, thanks so much. Before we get into the deep part of the podcast, just wanted to ask you a couple of warm up questions. What app are you most excited about these days?
Ooh, that's a good one. I actually love your app. I genuinely open it like probably every other day. Um, but besides that, probably spend a lot of time looking at my kids' like basketball schedules since I'm a glorified Uber driver for them now, which is life. Um, and then really starting to think a lot about messaging apps, right? Like, so I've been using a lot of WhatsApp, but now with everything that's going on around privacy rules and laws, I'm starting to kind of get a little more interested in what the privacy policies are behind apps like Signal and Discord, and where should I actually start to move my ecosystem and world. But yeah, I try to keep things pretty simple. I'm also a creature of habit. I use the same 15 or 20 apps every day, and I do it almost in a very OCD fashion.
Oh, very cool. What phone are you using right now?
I moved to the iPhone. I moved right after. Caesar, you know this. Your kids want the blue dot. So if your kids want the blue dot and you want family control of your kids, you have to move to the blue dot. So I am the whole family's on the Apple ecosystem.
All right, all right. I'm sure Google will get back a little bit of you at some point of time, but
You and have a mutual friend who's not very pleased about my decision. So
I can completely imagine. Fantastic. Tarun, so one of the key things that we want to talk about in this podcast is really how you've taken decisions around the pivotal points in your life. So maybe we start by picking out a couple of pivotal points that in your career, and then talking about if you can describe like what the pivotal point was, and then how you balance decisions around life, money, family, work, all of these things together to navigate that particular pivotal point.
yeah, it's a tough question. I mean, look, I think first of all, it starts with you have to have someone or something you can emulate, right? So you almost have to have a thesis around what it is you want to do. Um, I was fortunate enough, Caesar, where my first couple bosses right out of college were amazing in that regards. I had one boss, this guy named Jim. I don't know, I have no idea where he is, but he was my boss for like 6 months, and he gave me the best advice ever. It was my first job out of college, and I remember I was a software engineer. I went to this company called System Software Associates. I was on the build team. So this is the team that had to compile the ERP software. I was like, all right, whatever. I automated the entire thing. I used, that time it was all Unix based. I automated the entire thing, and I was like, okay, you don't need a 7-person team. I can actually just schedule it and everything works. So I did that in 6 months. And then I went to him and I was like, okay, you should pay me more, and I want to do this, and you should give me a promotion. And he sat me down and he said, if you start to look at career in a very linear way, you're going to struggle and you're never going to make it. And he said, you should look at it as your first 20 years of your working career are about experience. You're just absorbing as much as you can. And then one day it'll all click. And then you can find that, whatever that big thing is for you where you make the maximal impact. So at an early point in my career, I made a decision that, I may take a sidebar on this. So you know this, Caesar. When I was at Arta, you remember one of the things you asked us for an introduction is you just said, "What's a fun fact about you that no one knows?" And I don't know if you remember, we were at Felix's at his ranch, And my fun fact is that the number of unique countries I've visited has to equal to my age. And that's so, whatever my age is, I want to make sure I have that many countries. And what's interesting is the reason you go to all these countries is just to gain experience, right? Because these are memories, these are experiences that you end up like holding on to, and they last longer than any material goods. I decided to make my career that too. I wanted my career to be a set of experiences that I took on. And even if I hated it, it didn't matter, right? Because it kind of allowed you to decide what the next thing you want to do. And so, sorry for the sidebar, but the point being, my goal was to try different facets of jobs, right? So I started as a programmer, then I moved into running the automation, the QA team, then I moved into product role, then I went to business school, then I did marketing, then I did ops, then I had a design team, and then eventually like I went to Google and they're like, hey, do you want to do sales? I'm like, sure, I've never done sales. I'll do sales. And, and part of it was to me, every opportunity was like going to a new country. And you had there are a lot of countries I've been to out of the 50. I haven't been to 51. Unfortunately, I'm slacking. But there are a lot of countries I've been to where I'm just like, if I don't ever go back, I'm okay with that. Right. But there are a lot that I've been to where I'm just like, I would love to go back. And so I think the pivotal points for me were around every time I left or every time I felt like it wasn't something I wanted. My goal wasn't to just find another company that paid me more doing something similar. My goal was make a drastic change and do something different. And so it was all about enriching of experiences. And it served me so well. It came to, accumulation at Google, in the roles, and how Google was structured in a very matrixed way. And it's still something in my life. I'm really glad I made that decision. So those were the biggest pivotal decisions I think I made. I never wanted a linear structure. I always wanted variety.
Yeah. I think maybe let's jump into one of those key changes between careers. I'll let you pick which one rather than like where you think this actually gets highlighted in some interesting way.
Yeah. I was running product management for Nokia for Asia Pacific in Singapore, ironically. And Google reached out, actually met the person at Google on a flight. Like I was flying from Sydney to Canberra, and it was an empty flight. So they're like, okay, we have the flight load balance. So you need to sit next to this person. I'm like, all right, I'm sitting next to this random person. We kept circling around. And it happened to be Richard Sir. I don't know if you know him. He was an early Google enterprise head. And he's like, look, we need help. We need someone that can do something in maps, but it's a sales role in Asia Pacific. And I was like, okay, I've never done it because, and the interesting thing was every time I was in product roles or even engineering roles, I always had every salesperson that I worked with tell me, you should be in sales. You'd be really good at this because you're really good at talking to customers and you're really good at evangelizing products.
You are really good at sales.
And I was just kind of like, okay, I don't know what that means, but okay. And it was more just, I think I'm very passionate about whatever it is I'm working on. Like to me, it's the best thing ever. And so I remember when that opportunity came, I was like, that sounds great. And the fact that it was based in Hong Kong, which was even better. But I didn't even think twice about it. And I was like, okay, let's go try this. Let's go do sales. Let's go see if I can actually, I don't even know what the Maps product was that I wanted to sell. It was just like, it's Google. I get to do something in sales. I get to check 2 boxes. And you kind of went on a whim and you actually take a step back and you realize you're like, what's the worst thing that can happen? You do this for a year and you move on, right? You're still very marketable. So that was, I think, in my opinion, one of the most pivotal point. And maybe serendipity, it's right place, right time. Gosh, like if I hadn't sat next to that guy on the flight, like who knows what my career would have been. Maybe it would have been vastly different. Obviously might not have met you. That I remember that decision was one of the most vivid inflection points in my career. And I think the reason this was important, Caesar, is, you've been in prod and eng for a majority of your career before you founded your company. there was almost like this stigma of like, oh, you're a product eng guy, don't go to sales, or like, vice versa. So I was like, okay, I'll cross over to the dark side or come back. And it was great. I loved it. I had a blast. So, that was probably the most, I would say, one of the decisions I'm really, really glad I made. And I made it on a whim, and I made it without fear. And I'm grateful for that.
Oh, that's very cool. How do you take like your family considerations in? Like, do you and your spouse sit together and think through these decisions, or um, at that point of time, I'm forgetting whether you're married to Laura already or not.
No, we were dating, and I remember I did consult her. I was dating Laura. We had just started dating, and she's like, "Wait, where's the role?" I'm like, "In Hong Kong." She's like, "I'll move there with you," and I'm like, "Cool." Like that sounds great. I think obviously it changes. I think as you're young, you don't have kids, you're a lot more mobile. You can kind of live a very nomadic lifestyle. And, I also happen to have a spouse that's very much like me in that regard, right? She's an explorer. She likes to actually experience more. She's also very nonlinear. Um, but, as my career has progressed, your decisions are predicated around the well-being of your children, the well-being of your spouse. Um, but I think most importantly, and this is where Arta became so critical for me, is, I have two boys, Caesar, and it was fascinating. I had this colleague I worked with who made me read a book when in my I don't read much, so I'm a auditory learner. Yeah, I listen. So he made me read this book called Raising Boys, written by this Australian psychologist. And this is when I had my first son. And he's like, "You have to read this book." And I was like, "Okay." And I remember the book explicitly said the difference between boys and girls for a father is you have to be really present by the time they hit 8. 8 to 14 is when they emulate what it means to be a male. And they're looking to you to do that. And they want you and not the mother. And so from an early standpoint, when Rohan was born, I was always in my mindset, I never want to compromise my time with my children. And so then your decisions are no longer like, okay, I'll just take whatever I get and whatever's fun. You have to take that. But anything that disrupts my family rhythm and my family life and well-being is just off the table, no matter how great it is. That's just, at the end of the day, I look at my dad, he's old, and the people who revere him and remember him the most are his kids, not the coworkers and the people along the way. Those are great, but he's been retired for like 25 years now. And so, Laura is involved in every decision I make. And now, we always start with, is this the right thing for the kids?
Yeah, now makes total sense. So we talked a little about your career. You brought in your family. I wanted to move from there to thinking about how do you think about sort of finances as it comes to your life, your career, um, and the longer term.
Yeah, I think, my dad used to tell me this. I'm in Thailand visiting my father, so it's only right that I use his words. He used to say this all the time, and I never understood it until I got older. He said, "Money can't buy you happiness, but the lack of money will certainly make your life a lot difficult." And I never understood that, because there's this saying, like, everyone just says money can't buy you happiness, and then they forget the other ... right? Like, you kind of need the financial well-being. That's just the way the world works. I think up until probably midway through Google, in your 30s, you're just like, I'm going to work for 30 years. You don't care. I never worried about what my money in the bank was doing for me, or like sane investment decisions, because I always felt like there was this gravy train, which was your career and your earning power, and you're going to keep going up and it's going to keep improving. So you always felt like there's more, and the well will never dry. And then you get to a certain point and you start to have kids, and then you look at like how expensive they are. Like, they want iPhones now, which are not cheap. We still haven't gotten them one yet. Then you start to look at colleges, you look at education, you look at camps, you look at everything. And then you look at their well-being and then what you want to leave for them. And all of a sudden you kind of cross this inflection point where you're just like, okay, at some point I've got to earn more with what I have than earn more with what I do. And I think I think for me, money is literally represents the freedom of time. That's the way I look at money, right? This is a Morgan Housel thing, the psychology of money, right? Money allows you to have the independence and freedom to do what it is you want with your time, whatever that may be. And that's the way I think about money, right? Is money gives you that ability to really focus on things that matter to you, and you can be unapologetic about it at that point. So yeah, I hate to say it, I care deeply about that, especially, in my 50s now. I think about it a lot. I think about, what are the decisions I'm making? What am I doing? How do I continue? Because at some point, I don't want to keep, just working till I'm 75, 80, or just be reliant on income from a third party or a corporation to do that. So it is very critical in a lot of decisions, I think.
Yep. So how do you then plan for it? How do you plan with your finances and your wealth, stuff like that?
Very poorly for the first probably 40, 40 some years of my life. And then I think it's interesting, you know, one of the other passions I have, and, one of our colleagues is has an education startup, and I love what he's doing. It's sad that we teach you so much in math, and my kids are learning complex algebra now. They're going to start learning calculus and then physics and chemistry. And I'm but no one teaches you how to actually manage your well-being, how to manage your money, how to communicate, just basic things. And I think for the first 40 years of my life, my financial, the 20 years where I was earning and I could be financially savvy, it was all FOMO based. It was I heard someone that did someone, so therefore I should go do that same thing, right? And I think then you kind of take a step back, and it's very goal oriented, right? What is it that you're trying to achieve? When do you want to achieve it by? What are you trying to prepare for? And what does independence look like to you? And once you can define that, then it starts to become a lot easier, because then money becomes sort of this unlock at every point in your life. And so, unfortunately, before Arta came, we had to go through the journey ourselves. We tried 3 or 4 financial advisors. And I mean, I told you this, remember, this is even pre-Arta. They were making less than the S&P index, right? A lot less than the S&P 500. I was okay, this is a waste of my time.
They charge their 1%.
They charge their 1% on top of that. And then there were times where I could actually invest in fixed deposits in Singapore, for instance, just because of the OCI. And that was 6%, which was more than so it just got to the point where I'm okay, they're not actually looking out for your best interest. They're looking out for products that they have. And so you almost have to become this self-advocate. And so I sometime, my second year at Google, I was fortunate to work with this wonderful gentleman named Jay Remley, who was almost unapologetic about how open he was about his finances and his taxes and what he invested in. And I remember the first few months, I was what is this guy? And then you realized, wow, this is how he learns. And this is such a great learning mechanism, right? Because he's in the same boat I am, a little further ahead, age and kids wise. But so you started to kind of take that into your own, you start to become almost, you started to become a sponge where you're just okay, what is everyone doing? But you're not looking at it through FOMO, where you're just saying, okay, why should I do real estate? What does it mean for me? What's the benefit? Why should I do public markets? Why should I do international investments? Why should I do alternatives? What are alternatives, right? What is the taxation around alternatives? What do I want to do? So I started to go down, actually Laura started to go down a rabbit hole after our second child. And it just perpetuated from there. And then, yeah, of course, my decision to join Arta was, I was wow, okay, if we could take everything that's in our head, because we weren't the only ones thinking about this, right? It was actually interesting, Cesar. I was working with you for a year and a half, but we never had that depth of a conversation about finances until you left, where, even you and Venkat and Felix and all of them are going through the exact same thought process we are, right? Which is wait, what the hell should we be doing? Is the Google equity in our home good enough? Is that sustainable enough? Actually, that's highly undiversified. What about taxes? What about insurance? What about all these things? So, yeah, it it's even now, like I am part of multiple investor groups. I'm a sponge. I'm constantly looking for opportunities, not based on FOMO, but just because helps inform, yeah, just to learn, to inform me of what else I could do. And the crazy thing is, you know, almost every time I learn something new, I have gosh, I wish I knew this like 5 years ago, or gosh, I wish I knew this 10 years ago. And so, you asked me to start, you're like, okay, someone 20 years from now may want to emulate where I'm. So one thing I would tell them is like, be financially savvy early. Like take that into your own hand. I wish I would have done that earlier.
Yeah. But are there like three things you want to like share with people on what it means to be financially savvy? What are the sort of, if I were to boil it down to just three things that you wish you could have told the 20-year-old Tarun?
Yeah, I would just say number one is, especially in the country like the US, understand taxation. You know this. I'm such a fan of this because the taxes are so complex, but they can be so favorable and so wonderful if you understand them, right? If you understand what it means to tax defer, if you understand even just the basic difference between long-term and short-term, even the basic difference between like what vehicles you use to make purchases, like your name versus a trust, right? Yeah, like, where you are, if you're earning a lot, like defer certain things, understand that it seems daunting and complex, but it's really not. It's fairly simple in layman's terms. It just takes time. Number two is diversify. So, if you work in a tech company, if you work at a Google or a FANG or a Meta or someone, and you're having a good career, your forward earnings in tech are already so great. Diversify. As much as it feels like, oh my God, these companies are going to go to the moon, and they may, diversify, because you never know. Because for every great 10 stories you hear about, you don't hear about the 20 that like lost it all. And this is very, very problematic in my opinion in a lot of tech employees, which is their homes and their equities almost actually, when I started Arta, my home and my 80% of my portfolio. And I was like, and it took me your CIO sitting down with me, telling me, he's like, you're about as undiversified as they get, right? And I was like, really? But I've done well. He's like, not a good idea. And I think number three is, just really, really understand your risk profile and what you're optimizing for. And I think that's really important. Like, you should always in your head have a time horizon and a risk profile, and create a mathematical equation of those two. Because if you have those two, it'll help make decisions so much easier, right? Because then you're not stuck in the FOMO, then you're not stuck in the different things. And then if I could add a 3A, do the life insurance thing early. Like, do it in your 40s. Like, don't wait till it's late. That's
a little bit about this life insurance thing you talked about. What is it, this life insurance thing?
Oh man, it's the premium policy life insurance, PPLI. And actually, you were the one. I remember when we were at Arta, you're like, hey, we should think about what we do with this life insurance. I'm like, what are you talking about, Cesar? I'm like, what life insurance thing? I still remember you were visiting San Fran or Mountain View at the headquarters. And I was like, this makes no sense. And then you brought in Sam, and she whiteboarded to us how you can actually invest in your own life insurance. So you get qualified through a third party. Then you get a financial institution that lets you actually fund your own life insurance policy and let that grow tax-free, not only for your life, for generational wealth if you do it as an irrevocable trust. And when you actually, it's a little more complex than that, but when you understand the math equation, it basically comes down to, it's like a really large Roth IRA that your kids and their kids can have, that also keeps acting like a Roth IRA. And that's the best way I'd define it. Your money just grows tax-free. And you don't have as much control as you do on a Roth, obviously, but it's, as you start to get older and you're, you have a life insurance tied to it, which is always good for your family. But B, it allows you to start to invest in alternative assets, which a lot of times are not tax favorable. So yeah, Laura just did the PPLI, and I remember the day we actually deposited the money to you, the day we sent it to Arta. She actually came to me, and I thought this was wonderful. She started being teary-eyed, and I was like, "Why are you crying?" I'm like, "Are you crying because we just have to give a large some money?" And she's like, "No, I'm crying because I feel so happy that I can leave my children this bucket that's tied to my well-being, my life, but will also continue to grow in spite of it." And that was actually really, really special. That was actually really cool, like to see.
Yeah.
So yeah, life insurance is gold. I probably won't do it justice, but I mean, I probably text Sam all the time. I'm like, "Sam, is this really real? Like, is this happening?" And she's like, "Yes, it is." It's amazing.
Now, thank you for sharing that, Tarun. I mean, we all know this, like this whole the tax advantages of life insurance have been such a well kept secret in many ways with the ultra wealthy, and being able to bring it to many more people so they can do it in their 40s and hopefully in their 30s is truly transformative. So that is very, very exciting.
I think it's sad. I think there are a lot of tools and capabilities that we have that people think are only available to ultra wealthy that actually are available to a much, much lower tranche below that. It's just there aren't enough financial individuals that care for that, right? Because there's just enough money for them to go after the ultra wealthy that they sort of leave this. They leave folks like us hanging, right? And there's so much more we could do. Like, if you were to just even, I actually remember the first time I heard of PPLI, I Googled it, and all the docs were like, "It's meant for the ultra wealthy," and I was like, "Okay,
Yeah.
forget it."
You need to have 50 million or $100 million to be able to do it.
And 100, yeah, to do it. They're like, "In fact, we don't recommend anyone over like anyone under 30 or 35 million." This was like on a Wikipedia page, and I was like, "Forget it." And then I sat down again with Sam and Venkat, and they're like, "No, no, no, no. You don't need that. Like, let's take a step back." And when you actually go through the math, you're like, actually, that's not true at all. This isn't a tool for the ultra wealthy, because if you look at the tiers, you should do it even if you have 3, 4, 5. Like, it's totally worth it. It's totally worth it, right? So, I think there's just a lot of noise in my opinion in the market, and unfortunately, the noise is highly biased as opposed to what I think you can or should do.
No, that's why we started Arta, so that we can take all of these incredible tools and bring them to millions more people, like way earlier in their lives, and bring them all the financial superpowers that the ultra wealthy have. That's the exciting part. Darren, let's change tracks a little bit, and let's just we're getting to the end of the podcast, and I wanted to ask you a couple of more sort of stepping back questions, like if there's one message you wanted to give to the Tarun who was 20 years old, not just financial, anything, what message would you give?
I would probably say two things. I would say one is more financially oriented, and then one is more just life oriented. Financially, I would say, just I wish I would have started my journey earlier. It's as an unmarried individual, 20-some-year-old, you feel like you can live forever and like whatever. Like, you don't worry about that. But just even taking an hour every month and just taking a step back and understanding your financial goals and creating that kind of hunger and appetite would have been nice. I think on the more personal, or I guess philosophical side, is check your ego aside. Don't let your ego kind of dictate your career, right? And I was fortunate, Cesar. I had, it's interesting. I remember when I went to Google, within my first month, I was like, how the hell do people work in this? This makes no sense, right? It's completely polar opposite to what corporate America teaches you. But then you walk out of there and you're like, wow, this is wonderful. How like people can chuck their ego aside. So they're always just there to help each other because the team success is more important. And I didn't have any of those good habits. Google was a rude awakening for me for the first couple of years, and I'm glad I did it. And I wish I would have checked my ego aside a little earlier. But I was fortunate I did it a little later in my career, but worked out.
I'm glad I met you after you had chucked your ego aside, because I never felt any of that. It was so much more fun.
No, because it was always, otherwise you were taught in your career like me, right? Like, what do I need to do to take care of me, right? It's just like you hear these things, right? Like these like really like bombastic American phrases. You always got to be looking out for number one. And like, I'm just like, no, you don't, right? Like, don't apply that to your career, because instead surround yourself with really amazing people, and you'll be surprised like what you can accomplish together. So yeah, the ego thing, and I was fortunate it didn't spiral my career in the wrong direction.
That's great to hear. Okay, I have three quick rapid fire questions to end the podcast. So it'll be, I'll say something and then dash, you fill in the blank. Okay, ready?
Yep.
Okay. If you want to prosper, never underestimate the power of dash.
Ooh, your own mental capacity and your own wealth that you already have.
Yeah, what you already have. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
The three key ingredients for a long, fulfilling life are dash, dash, and dash.
Love, single most important thing. Health, really important. And if you have those two, you'll generally find a way to happiness. So I would put it in that order.
Yep. The last question. The simple joy that adds years to my life is dash.
Just watching my kids and just immersing my life into just giving more to them than I could have, like just guiding them through life. Like it's such a beautiful journey. I never, and you know this, you have two teenage kids. It gets more fun as they get older.
Yeah.
I love it. I wouldn't trade it for anything else.
That's beautiful. That's wonderful. Tarun, thank you so much for being on Live Long and Prosper. And thanks for your many, many years of friendship. So with this, thank you.
Yeah, I'll just say one thing in closing. For folks that listen, use Arta. It's wonderful. I'm biased, but I am not kidding. Like, we open the app every other day. It's such a gift. And thank you for bringing it to all of us. Like, such a beautiful thing you and all the artisans are doing. So thank you for that.